Thank you so much, Subodh. And Rohini, a very, very warm welcome to you on behalf of DLF and Atagalata.
Thank you,
And
Vani.
really, really looking forward to this evening and the
Thank
conversation we are going to have.
So,
As I mentioned before, I really love the bookshelf behind you.
thank
Do you
you.
want to talk about it as a, you know, opening remark?
No, our house is crammed with books in different corners, including my grandson's room. And as I was just complaining to you earlier, is the only problem with them being so spread out is I can never find the book that I want. Suppose I want to do some reference for my writing or something, it's impossible. But then I just wander about aimlessly, find a sudden book that I like, and I forget my work and just read whatever I found. So that's the serendipity of a library, whether it's in your somewhere else.
Absolutely. I think, what every good writer probably is a reader to begin with. That shows in your surroundings. So now coming back to, the star of the evening, it's your new book, The Hungry Little Sky Monster. And what a delightful picture book this is, Rohini. I
Thank you
really
so
loved it.
much. Megha did a great job with the illustrations, Megha Punathar, and Jagannath did a great job working with me, Chiki, my editor. We had great fun doing it as well.
That shows, it shows that you have had a lot of fun doing this. So I won't talk much about it, though I have, I would have loved to read this to my kids when they were little, because I was always hunting for meaningful picture books. And would you like to tell us, behind the screen kind of secrets about the book, the lovely illustrations, how it came about, and how did you enjoy writing it?
Sure, Vani. So my 3-year-old grandson, to whom the book is dedicated, Tanush, was the inspiration for this book because when he was around 3, I mean, we used to love to rush out and see the moon in its various waxing and waning phases. And I used to tell him all kinds of stories, from mythology. You're the mythology writer, but about Ganesha and the moon or all kinds of things that we had read. But then I thought it was time to write a modern fable about why the moon waxes and wanes. And so I created the sky monster idea, which we had some small stories in Marathi where there was a tailor who had to make clothes for the moon, but he got very frustrated because either it would be too small or it would be too big. And that's how the story ended with a punchline. And I said it was time to modernize the stories about why the moon waxes and wanes. So for my grandson, I wrote this one. And then luckily, Chiki Sarkar, which I sent it so that her kids could read it, but she said, let's publish it. So I got very excited because actually it's my first children's book outside the Pratham Books network. So I was really particularly excited to do it. And I do hope that children everywhere will love the story as much as I loved writing it. It's about this boy who asks his mother why the moon waxes and wanes, and then he imagines this sky monster. And of course, you have to read it to know what happens at the end.
Right.
Yeah, it also, I feel, allows mothers, parents, to take the child into the science behind why the moon waxes and wanes. You lead in with the story, but then you quickly get to the science. And kind of wanted that segue as well. Very important to allow their imaginations to fly away, but also to root them in all the marvelous discoveries of science. Then you tell people the man has gone to the moon many times, and so on and so forth. So I led from the fable, but then I would take Tanush through the science as well.
How wonderful. You know what? I think there are two things here. One is you used to actually take your grandson out to show him the waxing and the waning of the moon. I think that's so important for, any parent because most of the time, everybody is embroiled in their own day to day and we forget this curiosity that has to build in a child's mind. So, I mean, I hope this is just the start and you'll be writing it like a sequel. Is there a plan to do that?
I don't know. Maybe with this boy in the book, because a couple more idea. I mean, I've been writing children's books for a while now, Vani, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
I after this, another book came out for Pratham Books. So about 15 or 16 books in total, and another one on the way. So I've been writing steadily, and I've deliberately chosen so far to write for very young children because I think in India there are not enough books for that category of 3 to 5 years or 2 to 5 years. And I think it is so incredibly important that parents have access to books for that age group in their languages as well as a common language like English or Hindi. And of course, in Pratham Books, we did that a lot. We did translations and brought out hundreds of picture books and simple story books for very young children in multiple languages. So my focus really is on that little child who's just learning how to look at text and books and stories and let her imagination really grow along with the story. So that's what I have been doing in my writing.
That's I think, you know what, that's really the need of the hour, because we don't have as many picture books set in India, in an Indian context. I mean, of course, you know, this is very universal. The theme you have chosen is very universal, but I feel these picture books coming out of India is a really great thing, because our kids are still growing up with Cliffords and Franklins and Noddies. I mean, there is nothing wrong with that, but we should also give them some indigenous, flavor to it. They can relate better. What are your thoughts on that?
No, absolutely. And when we started Pratham Books, when I co-founded Pratham Books in 2004, that was exactly the purpose. Because I was working in the Pratham network, and as many people know this story, but we had just started this huge campaign in Pratham called Read India, and hundreds and thousands of children had learned how to read. But they had nothing to practice the reading with that was fun other than the textbook. And we could hardly find 500 or 600 books in any shop in India that was relevant to our children. And so we said we'll become publishers ourselves and hopefully impact the publishing industry too as we go along, because we were set up as a non-profit. And I must say, I retired a few years ago and the team has done even better after I retired. But I hope that we have demonstrated that there is a real emerging market. I mean, there are 300 million children in India, one of the largest children's cohorts in the world. And in India, one book for every 20 children is produced. In a country like the UK, 12 books per child is produced every year.
Oh, wow.
You have to really fill that gap. And the wonderful news is, as you may know, you yourself are a writer, but many more publishers have come into this space. The older established publishers are publishing much more, and the whole online world has just taken off. So there is a lot more access to a lot more indigenous, local, creative content for the children of India. And I couldn't be happier and prouder to have been
absolutely.
part of that story.
Yeah, you know what, especially books like this also give parents a way to connect with the children, bond with the children. You know, as we were talking before, doing something with someone is a lot more meaningful than, just engaging. I mean, just engaging is also very much needed with a child. But I think books like this give parents a direction too. You know, maybe when somebody reads this, they might come up with their own story about the moon, or they might come up with
child might. The child will.
Yeah, you're right.
You lead into something familiar like the moon, which is always there no matter where you are in the world. And it allows the familiar to become, in some sense, from familiar to unfamiliar. You can keep building stories, right? Something from known to unknown. And that's how the learning blocks are built. So you start with something that you just see in the sky every day and you wonder a bit about it. Then one story is created and then your imagination is unleashed to create the next one and the next one. And that is the creative process that a child engages in. And every child needs a little bit of a help to get onto that journey, and then they never look back. So good stories do that. They help a child on her own journey, right? So...
Absolutely. So, I mean, for a parent who is reading this wonderful book to their children, I mean, this is just a fun question. What are the 3 activities you would suggest after they read the book to the child, with the child?
Well, depending on the age of the child, I would definitely ask them. I mean, if I could take them to a planetarium. I know the pandemic has really made everything so difficult, but it's hopefully coming to an end. I would 100% find a planetarium somewhere nearby if I'm in a big city, or I would even take online. I wouldn't necessarily take the small child online, but the parent can go online to find resources about this night sky and the moon. I would 100% take the child outside to look at the moon, maybe create a small diary to mark when is there no moon at all? When is there a full moon? So creating activity, because children really like to see the moon. Most children do that. And so that's something you could do immediately. And then immediately at about age 3 and 4, they start to love learning about planets, right? So it's an easy segue into teaching them about the planetary system that Earth is a part of. So that's what I would do with this book. And then I would also ask them, do you think there are really monsters anywhere? And if they are, what do you think they would be doing? And can you draw if this hungry little sky monster has a friend, what do you think that friend looks like? Can you draw me one? So I think there are many things you could do with a book like this.
Those are fantastic tips, Rohini, really, because, children, especially young children, that 2 to 5, I would say, this book is even very relevant to a 1-year-old because of the illustrations there. I wish I could show this clearly. I know my light is interfering, but the pictures are so big, so beautiful, and so meaningful. I think they would want to read it again and again. That's what that age group does, right? I think each time they read or reread, if they can adopt these activities to go about, I think that's going to be so wonderful. And I really do hope, you will answer a lot more questions about the sea, about the wind, about all the elements of the earth.
Thank you for giving me the idea. Let me think about it.
Yeah, see, I look forward to it. No, actually, I love reading picture books. You know what? As an adult, it's a funny thing to say, but there is something about them. And yeah, one more question I wanted to ask you was when you're writing for young children, there are so many things to keep in mind, right? For example, the words, the sentences. So, how did it all come about? I know you have written a lot before. Was there any?
Yeah, no, it's, I read a lot of books when I was very young. And then I read a lot of books to my children when they were very young. And then obviously for my grandchildren, for my one grandchild and my nieces and nephews and my other sisters' grandchildren. So all the children in the world that have been in my life, that relationship has always been tied very closely to books. So in a sense, you get an understanding of the rhythm that a book needs if it is going to be attractive to a child. But I tell you, Vani, it's not at all easy to write for very young children because you have to parse the words very carefully. You have to write only the words that are needed. Extra words are not, how do you pare it down? 500 to 1000 to maximum 1500 words in a book. And it's very easy actually to write 50,000 words. And I've written novels also, but it's harder in some sense to write a really good young children's book. And once that clicks, you can see how the classics click around the globe. One of the books of mine that I did for Pratham Books, which by the way is free for anybody to see online, called Annual Haircut Day, is part of the Sringeri Srinivas series. And there I learned from the first book that some phrases need to be repeated. You can introduce new words because, as we all know, children have a process of meaning making, even if they don't read every single alphabet in the word. When it's in context, they learn to make sense of it and they need to be challenged. So you can throw in new words with new spellings too. But if the concept is very attractive and the words are relatively simple for the most part, with that meter and rhythm, that's when a child likes to go back and read it again and again and again. But I must say it's not at all easy. And sometimes I've succeeded in getting that rhythm and sometimes I've failed. And I hope I can do better and better as I go along.
No, I actually absolutely loved it. And I could see the effort that has gone into simplifying things. As you said, writing a 50,000 word novel is a lot easier because you have so much freedom to play around there. For Amar Chitra Katha, I used to write for 9 to 14, maybe. That itself was hard. And here you're geared at a much younger, generation. And as you said, you can't do too much, you can't do too little. There has to be 1 or 2 words. Yeah.
And illustrations matter for very young children. So you have to be lucky to get a good illustrator, as I did. And that matters a lot. Even if there are very few illustrations, as we remember from our children, Winnie the Pooh, just tiny illustrations in the original books. But how much they added to that literature. So illustrations do matter for young children.
And that was my next question. How did the work with the illustrator happen? Did you have specific pictures in mind that you explained, and then she
Yeah.
got down to?
So Megha and I had many interactions, and so did Chiki, Sarkar, and other people on the Juggernaut team. I had some ideas about what this should be, and she had some ideas, and we sort of came halfway. And she showed me some sketches, then we went back and forth. But we liked the style of her earlier work, so we were pretty comfortable that we'll get there. And it did take some time, but finally, I mean, she's done such beautiful work. Her sky is so gorgeous. Look at her sky. I don't know if you all can see.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So we were very happy, and it took a long time, but because she had to. There's a lot of skill involved in it, and we went back and forth a few times about how the Moonmaker should look. But eventually, we were all happy with each other, and I hope Megha is listening and thinks so too.
Yeah, you know what? People, when they look at a picture book, nobody understands how much work actually goes into this simple looking book. There
Yes.
is the script itself, there is the illustrator, and then, how we're going to put together everything. Where does the text go?
Yeah.
So I hope you enjoyed the process.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to my next one.
Absolutely, me too. With that note, I wanted to ask you about your writing itself. I mean, you have written across genres. You have written Stillborn, which was mildly sci-fi, right?
Well,
Or a medical thriller.
I did one novel long ago, which was a kind of a medical novel of
Medical
suspense.
thriller.
If not a thriller, at least it was more a suspense novel called
Yeah.
Still for Penguin. Yeah. And I wrote a non-profit book called, non-profit is in my head, I don't know, but non-fiction book called Uncommon Ground, which was based on a show that I did on television where I brought corporate and social leaders together in dialogue. So that was my second book, and fingers crossed, I hope more is in the offing.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just amazing how you have, written across genres. That's not easy to do at all. So, is there like a common thread that runs across your writing? I mean, what made you want to be a writer?
Oh, it was because when I got out of college, I wanted to be a journalist. I was always involved in social issues in some way or the other. So that naturally led me to journalism. And I was a journalist for a very long time. Now I write, I do still continue to write and express my opinion in editorials. So I do a lot of writing actually. I also, because I speak in public a lot, I also have to write off my speeches. So I'm always in touch with writing. But the biggest joy, of course, was writing for children. And that happened because we set up Pratham Books. While I had written stuff for children in the newspapers before, I wouldn't have taken it up seriously if not for Pratham Books. Because we found that there were so few writers actually that we were commissioning that some of us, Madhav Chavan, Rukmini Banerjee, myself, we said, okay, we'll only write some books. And while doing that, we enjoyed the process. And luckily, children like the books that we write. So that inspired me to keep writing. So the adult writing, the novel of suspense was really for fun. The non-fiction writing that I've been doing and will continue to be doing is very much related to my work, my philanthropy, the work that I do in my understanding of Samaj, Bazaar and Sarkar. So that keeps me writing. And but the most joy comes from writing for the little ones. No question about it whatsoever.
How fantastic to hear that. Lucky children actually you enjoy children's writing so much. So I mean, how do you make time to write? I mean, you're such a busy person. You're running so many things parallelly. And how do you motivate yourself to write? How do you consistently do it, which you have been?
Vani, but when I write for children, when an idea comes into my head, it doesn't go away. So until I put it out on paper or it just stays. And because I like it so much, and because I know there are children out there who need stories, it's kind of easy to make the time. Surprisingly, it takes more time than you would think to write 1,000 words. I write articles for newspapers routinely. Those will take me a few hours and I'll be done with it. But writing a children's book, even for the same number of words, sometimes takes months because you want to be really sure that the concept is right for that small child. that you're not talking down to the child. You're not sounding like some goody-goody adult. And you're not going to be boring because you don't know how a small child thinks. So you really have to calibrate your idea with really going into the mind of a small child and say, will this be accessible and fun for the child to read? Will the child learn something for it? So surprisingly, this takes me several weeks, if not months, to finalize the script of a small child's book, compared to the same number of words for something else. But time, when you are in a creative zone, time makes itself. You know that, you are a writer. So when you're writing and the writing bug bites you, other things just move away. Time, just expands. And there is always time for creativity, I feel.
Absolutely. So are you a method writer? Like, do you sit for a particular number of hours in a day and write?
I wish I had that kind of discipline. I would love to learn that. And there are many methods. I've been reading about some new ways where you are just supposed to take a blank piece of paper and just write on it every day. So I've tried some of those, but I'm really a spontaneous writer. I don't have a set time at which I write, but when I'm writing, then I tend to become a little obsessive. Then I'll only write for several hours, and then that's how it is, but not a fixed time in a day.
Okay. I think many authors are like that. Probably.
Actually, the authors I admire the most, Vani, and I admire so many of them, but say someone like Ramachandra Guha, who's so prolific, you're always jealous of him because he's producing books even before he's finished the earlier one. But that discipline of sitting from, say, 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. or from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. or whatever that is, the ones I admire the most always have that discipline, that very serious discipline of writing at structured times in the day. I'll get there maybe in my next janam.
No, I think whatever you are doing now is working. So, but I do agree with you. The prolific writers, especially, are the ones who take it as a 9-to-5 job or an 8-to-4 job.
Yeah.
I have some more questions which I don't want to. Here they are. So I don't want to forget my questions. So let me just quickly look through them. I wanted to ask you about your journey as a reader. I feel every good writer has to be a reader first. You have to admire those words. So how did your journey begin as a reader?
Yeah, when I was 4 years old, I learned to read pretty much before school taught me, because my sister used to be a reader and I used to learn from over her shoulder. And there was there were always books in our house. There was a library next to our home in Bombay, and I learned with books like the comics, the mythology comics that you write, but also typically Enid Blyton. And that's what we would get the most of and love the most of. Many of them are now banned. See how time changes. Many of the Enid Blyton's works have been rewritten because now they are being looked at in a light where some of them seem racist or some of them seem really improper today. But that's what we had, and that's what we read, and that's what we made the most of. So I've been a reader since I was 4 years old, and just gobbling up whatever I could find, and continued that. I mean, we're always reading in this house, all of us, one or two given time, both fiction and non-fiction, reading very prolifically, and really getting all the children of our country to have access to good books. Since they're 8 months old, you don't even have to wait till they get to first standard. So important. We have a lovely video of my grandson at 5 months. Tulika brought out these beautiful books, for picture books, board books for very little children, very, very tiny children. And he used to love them. And even before he was 6 months, his mother was reading to him. And before the last page of the first book would come, he would be crying for the next one because he was so excited about it. There's some really lovely videos of him doing that. So it's never too early to start with children. And we need to create a reading nation. A reading nation is a thinking nation. A thinking nation is going to look at not just blacks and whites, but nuances and grays, because that's what reading lots of books allows you to do. And it's really an important thing that all our people get to read good books of all diverse kinds, not one kind, not one language, all kinds, fiction, non-fiction. this ideology, that ideology, this form, that form, but extremely important. And the gift of a reading life to a small child is, I think, at least the best gift you can give anybody. Introducing books to very young children, young parents. Don't give them clothes, give them books. And luckily in India, there are many, many, many more books now for young children. So start that practice early is what I tell everybody. And I try to be the one who gives the first book to every new child that I come across.
How nice. And Rohini, would you like to speak a little bit more about your efforts with Pratham, because that's such a noble venture, a book in every child's hand.
Yeah.
Would you like to talk a little bit more about it?
I think I spoke about it already, but today the team, I retired, as I said, some years ago, but we had started this digital journey because we realized that the future is going to be digital, but more importantly, digital allowed us to really break open the distribution side. And it allowed us to completely break open the supply side. See, in a nation of storytellers, right? Every house in this story tells, every home in this country tells stories to its children, right? Every grandmother tells stories. And yet there were so few children's writers, so few books being published. So something had to break open. And luckily we hit upon the idea of saying that we'll just open this all out and anybody make it all free. So we put our books in the Creative Commons under the Creative Commons license, which allows anybody to read them free. And then as soon as you do something like that, it's amazing how much energy gets unleashed, societal energy. Writers started coming, editors, translators, illustrators, and we were able to get so many people involved in the societal mission of a book in every child's hand. And since then, it has flown off. And now the Storyweaver platform that the team came up with 5 years ago, which was a continuation of the earlier digital avatar, now Vani has millions and tens of millions of reads on the platform from all around the world, and they have hit 300 plus languages. So it just goes to show that when you have an undeniable societal mission where everybody feels they can participate in it, the magic of that and the power of that, and eventually it is the real power of it is the power of a good story, which as a writer of mythology, the power of a good story. And that's what we try to do, to democratize the joy of reading and to unleash the power of good stories especially for the 300 million children of India. But as it turned out, it has become accessible to children around the world.
My goodness, that is such a successful mission, in my opinion. What started in your head as a small thought now has grown into something so big. I think that's definitely, from a book lover's point of view, fantastic. See, there are dualities now. People question what is the difference between reading versus consuming content in other forms, for example, videos. So, I mean, I know you know the difference. Would you like to talk to people about your thoughts on what differentiates between the two?
Yeah, we also, because you and I, at least you are much younger than me, but we grew up with physical books. The smell of a book, the smell of a new book, turning those pages, having that direct tactile experience with the book obviously was very special. But we had to move beyond that narrow thinking if we really wanted children to have access. If you want people to have access, you have to not think that narrowly. And the good news is that some of the research that has been done around the world tells you that if you only do online reading, perhaps your mind loses its deep focus. And there are some studies done on this. But if you combine your reading experience between, or you share it between the physical and the digital world, so long as you're making sure you're always reading physical books alongside digital books, then your mind is able to keep up the practice of keeping attention and focus on the written word. So we cannot stop the digital age. What we need, Vani, is a digital pedagogy that is built by consensus and people trained in a new pedagogy, which allows material to be written, especially for children, which naturally lets them focus a bit more. which doesn't drag them off into 100 different directions and lose attention and focus. So a pedagogy will be built. Already it is being built. So I think we have to make the best of both the bridge. We have to bridge these two worlds for the mission of constantly sharing stories between each other. So I'm a believer in both physical and digital, so long as you don't exclusively do digital.
Correct. So that's one aspect of it, the physical book versus the digital book. And there is also this altogether new aspect where people question reading itself. So now the question probably, I used to get asked this a lot. Not everybody is a singer, not everybody is a dancer. If not everybody is a reader, why is reading enforced upon people? Why can't I just watch Noddy instead of read Noddy? So we know the answer, but I would love to hear your thoughts on the same.
Yeah, I think when you read, obviously your mind is dwelling on the point and the word for a much longer time. Different senses are involved, different neuronal connections are being made when you're doing reading, because you're doing much more meaning making. And this has been talked about a lot and proven a lot, that if you don't read, you're going to miss out on a lot. Because if you're just listening, you should, as I said, you can also listen, you can also watch, but the way your brain and your hand and the time you use connects creates a very, very different set of impressions on your brain and allows you to remember things longer and make meaning longer, compare more, come to conclusions, do deep analytics. I can keep going like this. I'm not a professor of either linguistics or neurology or neuroscience, but to me, the advantages are so obvious that reading and analyzing go so closely together. Reading and feeling empowered to be a self-learner are so connected. Reading and diversity of material are so connected. And therefore, deepening your thinking abilities, I think, is very connected to reading diverse books. And while watching is marvelous and very, very seductive, it's also much more passive. Reading is active. Listening and watching are passive. And you want to have a combination of all the three. You want to use all your senses and allow your brain's full potential to be explored.
Very, very well put. I hope people who are listening, see.
I think we're listening to be converted, Vani.
No, but you know what? All these videos have posterity. So if someone comes back to watch these videos, because I know that it really troubles people. I want to read, but I can't read. And what happens?
Parents get very troubled when their children don't read, because they feel duty bound, right? Oh my God, my child should be reading 10 books. The child is not reading, only watching something on the TV or on the mobile phone. And to those parents, I always say, don't worry too much about it, because they will start consuming books also online. So don't worry too much about it, but do make it possible for them to have physical books. You can't say that my children are not reading when there are no books around. So first, keep books around them, and you yourself must be seen to be reading, right? It's more likely your children will read if you read. But honestly, it's not worth taking so much pressure. The world is changing so fast that you will absorb written content even on the phone. So parents should drop their anxiety, but certainly work on accessibility to reading material physically.
Completely agree with you. Take them to bookstores. You know what I used to tell people, as a joke, that we should have creative reading classes and not just creative writing classes. There's creative writing sessions happening everywhere. Because see, with some of us, it's an innate need to read. But with most others, it can be cultivated, and it should be cultivated. And I hope we move towards the nation of readers.
Which is why I say, Vani, the earlier the better. The earlier you introduce a child to, and I would say at 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, that early, and then that magic starts to build. Yeah,
absolutely.
Late, sometimes it's too late.
Yeah, I used to tell parents when I ran the library, read with the child. If you have never read before, what's the big deal? You start reading with them, grow your reading with them. And I hope, are there any questions that I'm missing here? I don't see any.
No.
No, right? Okay, I think we are done with the session and the time is up.
I think the time
yeah, I could talk to you for another hour, actually. There is so much to know, there is so much to discuss.
Thank you so much. And really thank you to Atta Galata for setting up this prize. I think very honored to have been shortlisted. And as always, thanks to BIC for BIC, Ravi, and so many people for the Bangalore Lit Fest, the Lit Fest organizers. So this is all part of that stream of things that I think makes my city, Bangalore, so special.
Completely agree with you. What we had. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your thoughts with us. And those who are watching, please do read this wonderful, fantastic book. Even if you're an adult, you will love it. The illustrations are beautiful. The writing is so lucid. So thank you, Rohini. Thank you so much.
In fact, before you leave, there's actually one question, and I think it might be nice if Rohini could answer that question. This is a question from Akshara, who says, what is your favorite thing about the machinations of a young child's mind? I think that's a wonderful way to sort of end the session.
I'm not sure what machinations means in this case, but I think what I like to see in the young children that I've known all my life is how many directions their mind can fly in, and how much they can believe in alternative universes of their own making. So we have to, as writers, keep pace with that potential, which is really very hard. So the ability of a child to travel without borders in her mind is what I like the most.
Very, very well put. Very well put. I hope, though we may be talking to the converted here, I hope those who watch it later or, whenever, understand the value of reading at an early age. And thank you. Subodh, are we going to conclude the session?
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you both.
Thank you, Subodh.
Thank you so much, Rohini, and thank you, Vani, for doing this session. And even though we might have been talking to the converted live, what we all hope for is that we might be able to change one person every day who can potentially either start reading
one book at a time. Yes,
one story, one book, one child, one adult at a time is, I think, an endeavor we can all strive to reach.
Thank you for all that you do as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Namaste. Namaste.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.